BP digs deep to find new oil in the Gulf of Mexico. And the American drug giant Pfizer pays out over $2 billion for wrongful promotion of some of its drugs. Hello, welcome to World Business Report. I'm Tanya Beckett. The oil giant BP has said it's made what it describes as a giant new oil discovery in its fields in the Gulf of Mexico. BP is currently the largest producer of oil and gas in that area, with net production equivalent to more than 400,000 barrels of oil a day. David Strahan is an oil supply expert and author of The Last Oil Shock and joins me now. How big and how deep is this find?
It's a pretty chunky find by today's standards, but when they say giant, you have to realise that the oil industry, in terms of exploration, has come down in the world quite a long way. They used to, in the middle of the last century, discover fields quite commonly which were 10 billion barrels more, sometimes 100 billion barrels. So when you're talking about 3 billion barrels today, it is significant because we don't find very many of them anymore, but that's, in a sense, it's a bit like grade inflation in the exams. You know, they count that as a giant these days, whereas they perhaps wouldn't have done in the past.
And of course, in terms of consumption, it's not that big a deal either, is it?
It's frankly zip. I mean, if you think about it, if it's, let's say it's a 4 billion barrel field, they're not being terribly specific about it now. That's the oil in place, but of course they only manage to extract about 40% of the oil that's there. So that's, well, 1.8 billion barrels. We consume 30 billion barrels a year, so it's about 3 weeks worth.
And while we're on the subject, also it's going to be jolly expensive to extract.
Well, certainly, because I mean this is ultra deep water. You know, this is sort of frontier stuff, really. Although you know the big oil companies are doing this slightly more routinely now. But this well is 35,000 feet deep, which is deeper than Everest is high. It's pretty amazing what they've done. So yes, the energy that they will have to put in to get that oil out, and of course the money as well will be commensurately higher.
So wait, we've got an oil find which is smaller than they used to be. We've got consumption which is higher than it used to be, and it's going to be more extensive to construct than previous finds. What does this tell us about where oil consumption and prices are heading? Well,
my own view is that some people think that this all means permanently higher oil prices. My own view is actually it means very volatile oil prices, such as we've seen over the last 18 months or so. There was a period, for instance, between 2005 and 2008 when global oil production was simply static. We couldn't make it grow any further, and as a result we saw $147 oil. That helped push us into a recession, and here we are down at 70. We've been to 35, now we're at 70 again. And so I think what's going to happen is we're going to persistently hit the buffers. These sums, you're quite right, do not stack up terribly well. So what that means, I think, is persistent shortages or repeated shortages, which are going to give us these spikes and collapses in the oil price, which are going to be very uncomfortable economically.
So it's all dependent on government's ability and willingness to develop green energy, really?
I think so. I mean, and there's a problem there, which is that it's much easier to do that when the oil prices are high. I mean, that's a following wind for wind turbines, if you like. But whereas, you know, when the oil prices collapse, we know not only are oil production projects cancelled or delayed, but so are investments in green energy. So really we do need to give them as much encouragement and support as we can, because it's going to be a rather difficult environment, I think.
We haven't mentioned, when you're talking about environments, the fact that the Gulf of Mexico is really perhaps the most attractive part of this find.
Yeah, apart from the weather, I'm afraid. I mean, you know, we're just coming into a hurricane season. But yes, I mean, you're right in terms of political terms. This contrasts quite starkly. I mean, if you look at what BP's latest announcement was, it was the only oil company in the entire international slate of oil companies which accepted the terms offered by the Iraqi government, which were generally thought to be really stiff and uneconomic terms. So you know, that's one way of trying to get yourself into producing some more oil, and I would say a pretty risky one. Okay, your risk is the weather and the technology. It's not that your oil wells are going to be blown up by Al-Qaeda or expropriated by the government.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.